All right, everybody. So we'll get started here and let some folks trickle in as we get started underway. But thank you, everybody, for being here to How to Use Storytelling to Land Your Dream Job. Excited to have all you folks join. And by the way, if you can hear me, can a few people just chat in the Zoom really quick to let me know that you guys can hear me all right?
Can you hear me too?
Yep, looks like we're all good. Thanks all
Oh,
for confirming that. So we'll jump right in, guys. We had a really great presentation for the next 60 minutes or so. So glad that you guys can make it. A lot of you might be familiar with some of the things I post on LinkedIn just in terms of helping with career development and people trying to find a job. Some of you may be existing members of my company nexplay, so grateful to have you here. And there might be some new folks that have never seen me or interacted with our company before, but we're really excited to add some value to you guys if you're interviewing, if you're planning to interview, or if you're about to look for a job. This is going to apply to literally any of these situations. Storytelling is something that doesn't really get talked about a lot, but it's actually it's an underrated skill that most leaders and companies have figured out to a T and can use that to their advantage. So we're going to show you how to do that same thing in the job search process so you guys can have that competitive edge, especially everything that's going on right now. I think anybody who's interviewing or looking for a job, you want to do anything you can to really get that competitive edge. So here's a little bit of an agenda just to show you guys what we'll be talking about. So we're going to do some intros. I'll tell a little bit about my background and how I've helped people land jobs, especially right now during the pandemic. I have my fellow colleague, Mario, who is a senior consultant at Deloitte. He's going to talk a little bit about his background and how he's going to help today. We're going to talk to you guys about what storytelling is and where you can use storytelling, specifically the different touch points you might have with an employer. If you've heard of storytelling before, you may think that it has to do with just interviewing or how to tell a great story in the interview, but that's actually not the case. So storytelling can be used in a lot of different applications and different areas of, let's say, your LinkedIn profile, your resume, your cover letter. So some of these different areas where you may not typically associate with storytelling are really important when employers and hiring managers are looking at your story and your background. So we'll share some tips and tricks on how to optimize for those situations too. And then at the end, we're going to have some Q&A. So if you guys have any questions just about storytelling, if you have any questions about what I do at my company, or if you have any questions about the consulting world or what Mario does at Deloitte, we want to get to as many of those questions at the end of this. If you do have questions during, we'll try to get to those too if it's relevant to the topic. If we don't get to your question though, that's okay. We'll try to answer as many of those at the end as possible. And someone also asked, will there be a recording of the webinar? Yes, there will. So anybody who's attended here today, we're going to send you guys an email. You're not just going to get a recording of this webinar, but we're going to show you some different documents and tools that you can use. Start using those immediately if you're interviewing or getting ready to prepare for an interview. So we'll have all that good stuff for you guys right after. So we'll go into just some quick intros and backgrounds. Some of you may know me. So my name is Reno Perry. I'm the founder of a company called nexplay.io. We're also a member of 1871. So you've seen 1871, who's really been instrumental in putting this presentation together. They're Chicago's and arguably the Midwest in the US premier technology center. For those of you who don't know what nexplay is, so nexplay is a career advancement platform where we connect job seekers to insiders at top companies to get one-on-one consulting. We do interview prep with people, resume reviews, negotiations, and also if you don't have a connection to some of these companies, it's a good opportunity to try and get referrals to get a foot in the door at these companies. So my story is really something that is very tied into storytelling. For those of you who don't know my background, I actually graduated in the wake of the 08-09 recession, and I had a history major, which both of those aren't really a winning combo if you're trying to find a job when there aren't many jobs. But I was able to, in 2009, land a job at a Fortune 500 company called Stanley Black & Decker, where I've had a successful 4-year run there. And I attribute that to storytelling that really helped me get that job, where I didn't have any relevant experience, a history major, but being able to tell my story to the hiring managers was something that really helped me stand out. Fast forward, after 4 years, I was able to break into big tech and had a successful 4-year run at LinkedIn, and was there when Microsoft acquired them for around $26 billion. So that was an exciting time. I've worked as a coaching consultant on in the talent solutions team at LinkedIn, and now I have my own company, Nexplay. And even just in the last 4 months or so, we've helped hundreds of people get into some really amazing jobs. Companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, because they're taking a lot of the advice from our coaches and making the right connections. So I'm going to give you guys a lot of that stuff that we offer our members for free today. So again, really excited to have you, and I'll turn it over to Mario just so you can hear a little bit about his background and what he's up to today as well.
Thank you, Reno. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Mario Arthur-Bentil, and like Reno mentioned, I'm a senior consultant at Deloitte. I've kind of had an interesting journey. So when I graduated in 2010 from undergrad, I worked as a research assistant within the Federal Reserve, doing research on consumer issues and community development issues. And from there, I had a mentor, Barbara, who was an economist and also introduced me to the idea of data visualization. And from there, I just fell in love with that type of work, like using different ways of telling stories with data. So that always stuck with me, and I always wanted to find different ways to work within that space. So from the Fed, I went to Ernst & Young. I worked there for a couple of years doing audit consulting for the US Army. And the work wasn't too thrilling, but it was essential work. And I worked with some really good teammates that helped me learn a lot. But I still really had this lingering for data analytics, data visualization. So I was trying to look for those type of opportunities within EY. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find those type of opportunities, or I just wasn't able to get my foot in the door. And by chance, I came across a data science boot camp through a company called General Assembly. And it was a 3-month boot camp to learn how to code in Python and learn how to do machine learning in Python. So I quit my job at Ernst & Young to enroll in that program at General Assembly and finish that program after 3 months. And after that, I got hired by Deloitte. So currently, I try to help different federal clients with data issues or try to use data to solve their problems. I'm currently working on a project with the IRS criminal investigations, working on a strategic plan, and eventually I will be working with agents to help them with their investigations. So I think what's interesting about my path is that I hit these different obstacles, and then eventually I was able to find the type of work that I do love, which is data science. So I'm happy to answer any questions about hitting roadblocks within your career and try to pivot into something else. And I hope that this conversation, this presentation will be beneficial to you guys. And like Rita mentioned, storytelling is a great way of letting people know of where you've come from and what your why is and what is your purpose when it comes to any type of work you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario. For those that don't know, Mario is actually an insider/coach for nexplay.io. So if anybody after this call is interested in just learning more about breaking into the consulting space and some of the cool work that he's done, Mario's a great resource to help people. He's been helping a lot of our members do that today, and would be happy for anybody on this call who's interested in that. So we'll jump in, guys. So what is storytelling? So story is something that's been around really for thousands and thousands of years. And one of the earliest forms of human communication. You can see we have some caveman paintings on here, but people have been using this now for thousands of years, passed down from generations, and it's something that you guys can now use to your advantage when trying to find a job. Storytelling is something, when you think about it, it's really a powerful way to organize information and help people make sense of things that maybe are a little bit complicated. And when you think back to a lot of the noise that's out there in the world, this is where storytelling can really help make things easy for people to remember. And that's the goal that I'm trying to set for you guys today, is when you use storytelling, to use it as something that helps you be memorable to hiring managers, to companies, so that when they're interviewing hundreds and thousands of candidates, which is literally happening every day, it's so hard to see anybody stand out from the crowd. But the folks that have really helped get into some of these top companies and jobs, one thread I've noticed is that they're great storytellers. And so that's what we're going to share with you guys today. And so one of the reasons why storytelling is even something that was worth bringing up is because it's not our opinion, but it's all rooted in science. So there's a psychologist, his name's Jerome Bruner, and he did a pretty comprehensive study that showed stories can be up to 20 times more memorable than just facts. And so that's really powerful. When you think about your resume, it's easy to think about statistics, responsibilities, facts and figures, and people tell you to always just quantify things as if that's the answer to all your problems. And while that's really important, it's also important to craft a story around that so that you can be a lot more memorable in the career process. And trust me, guys, this is something that really does matter. I've had friends and folks who, for example, there's a recruiter at Amazon who I know, I was just speaking with the other day, and they said at any given time they have 5,000 candidates that is in their pipeline. And they might end up hiring 2 or 3 of those people. And so when you think about that type of situation, how can that recruiter possibly keep track of 5,000 candidates and know who is someone who's memorable or that stands out? And so this is one of these ways where we've seen people be able to break through those thousands or hundreds of people to get that competitive edge. So here's what's the elements of a great story. So if you guys are thinking, great, I believe in stories, I get it. So what makes up a great story? And so I borrowed this from a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And he outlined what is a story. And so he has all these different characters here where you can see you have the character, which is the protagonist, and that's going to be you, encounters a problem. Then they meet a guide along the way that gives them a plan or resources to then go and do that action or that thing, and it ends in a success. And you avoid failure by doing that. And you guys may not believe it, but that's actually the story model for every successful Hollywood script. They follow that same guideline for all these successful movie franchises, and you don't even know it, but you watch it and you really are engaged in a lot of these movies. And so I just used some of these as an example: Star Wars, Hunger Games, Lord of the Rings. These are all multi-billion-dollar film franchises over the years that have really capitalized on that model of a great story. And if you guys don't believe me, here's an example, right? So you have Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. He has a problem where he needs to defeat the Empire. He then meets a Jedi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who helps him to trust the Force, and then he defeats the Empire, and it leads to a success, and the Empire is defeated, and the rebellion and the galaxy are safe. Or for people more recently, you have Rey, who defeats the First Order in Star Wars, but a very similar storyline. For anybody who's interested in Hunger Games, you have Katniss, who's the hero, the protagonist. She has a problem where she needs to survive the Hunger Games. She then meets a guide who's Haymitch. He's won the Hunger Games before, who helps her compete and try to get public sponsors. And then that ends in the success where she wins District 12 Rejoices and avoids that failure of District 12 being crushed if she didn't succeed. So that is a similar model in every successful Hollywood movie. So part of what we're going to be doing today, guys, is really unlocking your inner screenwriter, pretend like you're writing a Hollywood movie, and taking elements from that into your own story so that it can be something that's really memorable and stands out. And you guys probably subconsciously don't even know, if a movie doesn't follow this formula, you're probably not interested, or you switch it to another movie. I can't imagine, for example, if Hunger Games was a story about a young woman who was just trying to find someone to marry, and she was going to get her first car, and is just growing up and having to deal with school. That story probably wouldn't hit the same way, right? You're really interested because there's this drama, there's this problem that Katniss has to encounter and overcome. And a lot of that's true for when you talk to hiring managers and companies. They want to really understand what are some of these challenges and obstacles that you maybe have overcome. And so that is one of the things, if you guys can take away from these movie scripts and what really makes a great story, there's two things I'd like you guys to remember. One is that somebody encounters an obstacle or a problem. And then the second part is what happens if they don't fix that problem. And so those are the two elements that I've really noticed that really hook people in, is that there's this problem and then there's this really bad thing that happens if they don't hit a problem. So that could be, you need to hit a deadline. Okay, that's the challenge. You have to hit this deadline for a project. But what happens if that project doesn't get done? And so that implication is that sort of drama element that really hooks people in and gets them interested in your kind of stories that you might be having. So we're going to shift now to the second part. Where can you actually tell these different kinds of stories? So as I mentioned earlier, story is not just limited to the interview. Story is actually all around us and in these different areas that you guys may not recognize, but people are looking and they're seeing these different parts of you out there in the world. So the first one really is, I think, important is your personal story. And that's really getting into finding your purpose or your why. And this is a lot easier said than done, but I have some tips and questions that you guys can look at how to find your actual purpose and why, so you can craft that into your own personal narrative. We talk about resume and cover letter. So a resume is not just stats and figures. A resume and a cover letter are actually a unique piece of you. And the best folks who I see are memorable and cut through the hiring process are really great at taking that story and somehow integrating it into the resume, into the cover letter. So we're going to show you some examples of that too, some real examples that you guys can walk away with to do that to your own resume and cover letter. The other one is going to be around online presence. So specifically today, we're going to focus on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is such an important tool, not only for networking, but your own personal brand. And if you guys don't know, when you apply to jobs or you reach out to people for coffee chats or informational interviews, the first thing everybody does is they go to your LinkedIn profile and they're trying to understand, what is this person about? What do they do? What's their background? They're really curious. And so that's a great opportunity for you to essentially have an elevator pitch on your LinkedIn profile. So we're going to show you some examples of how to do that, including my own profile, but I have some other great profiles that I can show you guys, and you can take those away after this call to try and do something similar. And then of course, interviews. So this one's really common and popular. If you're interviewing, using storytelling in the interview can give you a really competitive edge. So we're going to show you some frameworks and things to keep in mind when you're interviewing. And we have a really great document that you guys can take away from this to help you organize your interview questions and stories and whatnot. So these are these four areas where you can use story. And the next one we're going to talk about is really finding your why. I don't know if anybody here has heard of Simon Sinek, but he's an acclaimed author. He is a famous leadership guru. He has one of the most popular TED Talks with over 50 million views right now. If you haven't seen it, I would check it out. It's called How Leaders Inspire Action. And it's all about finding your why. And he talks about this why in this kind of format, which he calls the golden circle, where there's three parts of an organization or a company. It's what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. The whole premise of his talk is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that is so important, because that's why a lot of you may be interested in certain companies over others. You may go to the about section or read about a company's mission that inspires you, and other companies don't have that. He uses the example of Apple, where when they were just getting started, there were other companies who make great laptops, great phones. Even today, Apple's phones aren't the best hardware. They don't have all the best specs, but for some reason, every year, we keep going back and buying Apple products over and over again. And it's because Steve Jobs did a really good job telling the story of Apple and how they're different than other companies like Dell or Samsung, et cetera, who tried to compete with them. So that's not just for companies. There are politicians who use stories to get you to vote for them. There are company CEOs who use stories in their mission to get you to work for them. So we're going to turn that on its head and understand that you guys can do the same thing to get companies to hire you. Because when you find your why, you're going to have a lot more integrity. You're going to have a lot more direction in what you want. And when you talk about that on your LinkedIn profile and your resume and interviews, that's really going to help you stand out to these kinds of companies. So that's a big important reason why I wanted to bring this up. And if you're asking yourself, okay, that's fantastic, I just don't know exactly what I want to do or what I'm interested in, that's okay. That stuff's going to take some time, but here's 5 questions that I'd like you guys just to take a look at. And I'm going to send this to you afterwards, but I ask myself this every year since I saw that video of Simon Sinek, and it's been really helpful in grounding me and creating my why and my purpose. And that comes out in everything I do, which is why I'm even doing this webinar and I have this company right now. But one of those questions would be, what gets you excited, or what can't you stop thinking about? Is there a problem or challenge that emotionally moves you to take action? What kind of work would give you satisfaction or fulfillment? And even what aspect of your career or past work experiences have really helped you? So you guys can take a look at that and think about what are some of those areas of your career. If you're early on in your career, think about some classes or internships or projects maybe you've worked on. And then think about what kind of work maybe feels pretty easy or effortless to you, but you're really curious about it. So I always ask myself these questions and write them down and take a look at, okay, where are these things that interest me? What energizes me? And if you need some help, you can always consult with friends or family. I recommend doing that. You never want to have someone tell you what you should do, but try to see, hey, what are some things that you think I'm excited about or that I'm good at? And that's always been something that's helpful for me, is asking my friends where they think I am on that spectrum to help with that. So this is a quick cheat sheet just to help find your why or your purpose. This will take a little while, but if you guys haven't done this exercise, that would be step 1. And then once you do that, you can tell that story on your LinkedIn. You can tell that story in your resume. You can tell that story to hiring managers and build a connection with your story to that company's story. And that's something that's really powerful. As being someone who's been a hiring manager before, when I get candidates who say, here's my story, I grew up as an immigrant, I had no connections, I had no wealth, I look at what nexplay is doing, and that really inspires me to help close the network gap and income inequality that exists by not having connections or a network. And the candidates that do that are the folks that really stand out to me, and I go, wow, that's the same thing we believe in as a company. And that's incredible. You're the exact kind of person I want to connect with. And so that's the power of the story, is when you can do that, it's no contest when you're talking about other candidates that don't have that kind of purpose or that why. So hopefully that's helpful, guys. So we're going to go into another section here about the actual resume and cover letter. So Mario's going to take it from here because he's got some great examples to show you guys how you can make sense of the data and statistics to really tell a story on your cover letter and your resume. So Mario, I'm going to kick it off to you so you can help show people what are some ways you can improve your resume and cover letter to tell that story a little bit better.
Awesome. Thank you, Reno. All right, let me just share my screen. I think you have to pass the rights to me to share.
Let me do that here.
Or okay, there we go.
Try now.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. All right. Can you guys let me know in the chat section if you can see my resume or you can see this resume?
I can see it on my end. Yep.
Okay, awesome, great. All right, so here we have Tom Schultz, right? He is a recent MBA graduate, and I think he does things that are really interesting when it comes to relaying the type of achievements and milestones that he's hit within his previous work. So here we have the resume summary. So I highlighted this one section because I thought this was interesting. Some sections have been altered to not reveal the details of what work he was doing. So in this case, he ran the XYZ digital campaign for the Obama administration that attracted over 1 million daily active users for community development promotion. So let's not even look at the Obama administration part. But I think what's interesting about telling a story is about impact, because we've all done different types of work where we're doing something to make something better in some way, whether it's like increase or reduce time or reduce energy to relay a result to a client, to our organization, to whoever. And in this case, this guy, Tom Schultz, he attracted this many numbers. So one way of showing impact is metrics. So in this case, numbers. So number of users or percentage in decrease of time or something of that nature. Now, that doesn't always mean that you always have to use numbers to show impact. You can also show impact by the work that you've done, assuming that that work was not available or you weren't present to do that work. What would happen as a result? Who would be the stakeholders that would be at loss of the work that you weren't able to do? And that's a way of telling a story. So if you think of a story of the basic sense from, let's say, the protagonist dealing with a problem, and the problem has an action, and then the action has a result. That's the same type of structure you can use in your resume too. So we can reverse it. So we can say that the result is, in this case, increasing the number of daily active users, and the action that was taken to do that, and the problem that was solved as a result. And the reason we wanted to show the results first is because the person that's reading the the person that's reading the resume will see that response first and be able to gravitate towards the problem that you're able to solve then. Let me just go to another example here. All right, so in this case, here's an example of Tom Schultz dealing with a problem and the action that he took to deal with that problem. So in this case, he was dealing with declining customer engagement. So dealing with customer engagement is the problem that this person was dealing with. And he developed a social media campaign to deal with that. And in this case, it also had a result, which I didn't highlight here, but it led to customer acquisition and click-through rate by 300%. So in that case, you have the problem, which is in this case is declining customer engagement. You had the action that was taken, which is developing the social media campaign. And then you have the result that came out of that, which is the increase of customer acquisition and click-through rate by 300%. So that's the type of format that, granted, you can't use in every single point within your resume, but it's something that helps to tell a story, and you can definitely build on that when it comes to your interview. So that's an example of a resume. And let's pull up an example of a cover letter.
Yeah, and while he's doing that, so the big takeaways, if you're thinking about your resume and telling a story, is in that example, one, you want to align your resume to the role and that company and get as specific as possible. And then instead of just quantifying and saying, here's all these statistics and great results I achieved, one of the examples in that resume was that Tom mentioned specific problems that he had. So campaigns were not performing well. Things were not as great as we thought they were, but here's what he did to turn it around and increase the results by X%. So
Exactly.
those would be big takeaways is think about, what are some challenges and issues you've overcome. You can put those in your resume, and then make sure that there's that specificity there so that your background and what you're interested in aligns as much as possible with the company and the role. And hopefully that if you've gotten some advice before from career coaches and talent strategists, that they're giving you that same type of advice, because that's going to increase your chances of getting that call back, getting an interview. Whereas if you're just submitting generic resume, and it may be a great, fantastic resume, if it's not aligned and there's no linkage there between your story and that company, most likely you're not going to get an interview from that. And I've seen that happen time and time again. So here's a couple examples of things that when you're thinking about a cover letter, if there's one great area that you can tell a story and differentiate yourself, it's going to be in this cover letter. And so I'll let Mario talk through what are specific things in the cover letter. So we're not here to tell you guys, here's a complete cover letter and how to write that. But when you think about story elements in a cover letter, Mario is going to talk about where are these different pieces that you can add to your own cover letter.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so here's an example of a cover letter. So for this particular candidate, they are a rising junior who is studying political science and journalism with a passion for writing and politics. So the cool thing about that is, one, it's foreshadowing. So in this case, it's showing the background that the person has, whether it's academic or work-wise. And then on top of that, it's showing the connection towards a passion, which is just like what Reno mentioned earlier, the why. It's just like a synonym for why. So it's a reason why this person is doing this. It's kind of setting like this, it's kind of giving the setting before we get into the bulk of the matter. All right. So here I highlighted this next section because I think this is interesting. So she says, during my sophomore year, I searched for an experience that would combine my writing and communicating abilities with my advocacy for social and political change. Now that's a really definite why. And in this case, this particular candidate, what she's doing is she's connecting what she has done or her passions to something like a cause, like a drive, something that pushes her when it comes to what she really wants, the type of impact that she wants to have in this world. And that's definitely very important. And I think it's something that we all try to look for within our careers. I mean, that's the reason why I made that change within my career too. You're just looking for something that really moves you and then it enables you to make that type of influence that you want to have within your career. And then with the next section, this kind of brings it back home. This kind of similar to what Reno was mentioning about the hero that makes that journey into a realm of the unknown and is able to come back with some type of item or some type of knowledge to make things better in their previous world. So in this case, this candidate says, through navigating sensitive topics and understanding the importance of persistence, I learned the process and effort that go into a grassroots campaign, as well as expanding my knowledge of social media in the world of social justice. And I didn't mention this before, she was part of this women's medical funds team, and she was part of this fundraiser. So going through that particular experience gave her the additional knowledge that she needed that added to what her main cause is, what her why is. And I think that's something that you always want to have that comes out within your cover letter. Definitely your cover letter, because that's something that really stands out and it helps to relate to the employer why they should hire you. And I know that there might be some critics or that are not too sold on the idea of why, but I assure you that the employer definitely is, because out of a pool of candidates, this is one thing that helps you stand out. It's showing your why and showing why you could be a valuable asset to the company that you're applying for.
Yeah, well said. In this case, she's chronicling her connection to advocating for women's health issues, and that comes out in everything she does and talks about her early experience in college and how she's done that. So we'll show you guys this example. And one of the things that I've been doing in helping other job seekers is I'm going to also share with you guys the exact cover letter that I had used to get into LinkedIn. And that was one area that I told my story. And when I had talked to the hiring manager afterward, because I had no prior tech experience before getting into a company like LinkedIn, and I said, you know, what were some of the areas that maybe compelled you to hire me? What stood out? One, the interview part, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But before I was even considered for the interview, there was a story that connected to that particular hiring manager in my cover letter. And part of that was, again, drawing on my personal background and my story and why I was connected to LinkedIn, why I believed in their mission, and how I've been doing work, even though it's not relevant tech experience, I was still the right candidate from a mission perspective and connected to them in some kind of way. And so try to draw those connections when you're thinking about writing a cover letter to companies. And personal stories are great. Even if you have setbacks or failures that you might consider, and you don't want to talk about that, or it's not relevant, you don't think, and people don't want to hear it, all of that is part of who you are. And it's what makes a lot of these stories and cover letters interesting is when people embrace their backgrounds and challenges that they have, and when they can rise to the occasion and share that with somebody. Again, it takes that type of candidacy, it takes your job candidacy to another level that most people aren't ever going to do. So I'll show you my exact example. If you guys want to borrow it, you want to make your own out of it, I welcome you to do that. And I hope it helps as many of you as possible when you're thinking about your cover letters moving forward. Awesome, guys. So we're going to transition now to what's a third area that you can tell stories. And one of those areas is going to be around your LinkedIn profile. So really your online presence that you have. As I mentioned earlier, this is going to be really important because you may not think this happens a lot, but nearly 9 out of 10 times you apply to a job or you reach out to somebody for a coffee chat, they're going to go look you up on LinkedIn and they're going to try to understand what's this person about. Are they someone that is aligned with the company values? Do I think that they could be a good fit here? And so you have an opportunity to tell that story so that you don't get passed up for somebody else. The worst thing that can happen is someone goes to your LinkedIn profile and you don't have any information there that tells them who you are, and they just click out immediately and go off to somebody else's profile. So I'm going to share my screen and show you guys some examples of some really great profiles that I think do a great job at telling a story and hooking people in so that you guys can see and get an example of that as well. All right, so we are back to trying to move this. There we go. So I'm going to show you guys a LinkedIn profile. This is going to be for anybody out there who is a student or recent grad. Yusuf is a recent grad, and I used him as an example before to other people when I work with clients or I've done these talks before. One area that you can really stand out when you think about your LinkedIn profile is your headline. So your headline is this section over here that lets you tell people what you're about before they even click on your profile. So it's going to be the first thing people see when they're doing searches on LinkedIn or if they see you pop up on their feed. So think of this as kind of the advertisement to your profile. So I want you to read my profile. And the way to do that is by having a really great headline that hooks people in. And so Yusuf is really talking about something that's a passion to him. He's a leader who dreams big and has a growth mindset. I've seen examples where even in my own profile, I'll show you guys really quick. Another example can be telling people exactly what you do. So in this case on mine, I put helping people land jobs at top companies through insiders, which is exactly what nexplay does and helps people do. I've seen people put accomplishments in their title. So you can say it could be passionate leader or passionate sales leader with a history of quota overachievement, or someone who sold millions in dollars of SaaS products in the last 5 years. Something to really hook the reader in, to show them that, okay, this is someone who's different. Because most people just put their title or who they are. They might just say student at X university or marketing manager at X company. And that's what everybody else does. So nobody's going to click on your profile if you just have something that is going to be pretty basic to them. Another area that you can stand out on your LinkedIn profile that I would give some really attention to is the About section. So the About section is a window into you as a person, and you have a lot more space here than on a resume and a cover letter to actually tell people more about who you are as a person. So I won't read through Youssef's entire profile, but you'll notice there's key elements in here that tell a great story. One is he talks about his background as a marketer, his background in analytics. He talks about his journey through school, not just about work and school. He talks about on a personal level, he achieved one of his biggest goals by losing more than 100 pounds over the course of almost a year, which was pretty incredible. And then at the bottom, he talks about his lifelong goal, again, getting back to that why and your purpose. He wants to make a positive impact in the world and help people with as many resources as he has. So most people don't take time to write their summaries out. But again, this is another way that you can create that window into your life that is much different, tells a much better story than just a resume or a cover letter. Another example I'll use is Katrina. She's a software developer. And she talks about here, I caught fire coding. So one line to really hook somebody in. And then she talks about her dream when growing up, what she wanted to do and how she got involved into coding, and what really made her passionate in an entertaining and fun way. So she talks about Monty Python's Flying Circus, and how she got to fall in love with coding. And then she also talks about her skills in here. Another example, Daniel, software engineer at Google. I really like his background. So he talks about, even since a little kid, he's loved software development, because you remember sitting in front of an old Atari 800 computer gaming system, and that really took off for him as the catalyst to get interested in coding and create games and look at making this as something that's going to be a career of his. And so these are the kind of stories that really stand out to people, especially these large tech companies, any employer. It's something that breaks the pattern of what they typically see every day. So that's something I would encourage you guys to do, is if your About section just has your skills or what you do, spend some time to really think about, what you care about, what's your personal story, and how it connects to what you're doing today. And use some of those questions I showed you as an example to have that come out in your profile. So I'll share these examples with you guys in an email too, so you can take a look at them and revisit. If it's something that you guys really need some help with, a lot of our insiders or coaches at nexplay help people craft these About sections on their LinkedIn profiles and cover letters. So that's something that we'd be happy to do for you as well if you guys need some help. So hopefully that gives you guys an answer. Again, there's a lot more you can do on your LinkedIn profile, but there's two areas that I think are really important for telling a better story. And that's your headline and the summary, if you guys take those two takeaways from here. So the last part we're going to share with you guys about how to tell stories is around interviewing. And so before we even get into that, we have a couple of questions that we wanted to ask you guys. There's a poll feature from Zoom that's going to let you answer so a couple of these questions. We want to just get an understanding of, where are some challenges and roadblocks you're having in the interview process before we talk about this final part of the workshop or webinar. So Juana, if you have a chance to put those on the screen. And just a second, guys, it's coming up shortly. I know we're getting some more question. Yes, the session will be recorded for anybody who recently joined. And give us 1 second, guys. Question is going to pop up. All right, here we go. So this one we'd really love to know from anybody here. If you're having challenges at interviewing, we want to know what you think could be some of the potential issues that you're running into. Another question. Yes, we will send the example of the cover letter, so don't no need to worry there. Awesome, guys. Thanks for answering some of these questions. We actually have some of the answers from you folks on the screen where we thought the biggest challenge or challenges. And it seems like a lot of folks, most of the folks feel like they ramble sometimes. In addition to can't gauging what the interview thinks and answers aren't interesting, relevant enough. So thank you for sharing that, which is great because it's going to be really relevant to what we talk about next. We have another question we wanted to ask you guys as well in terms of where are you having challenges getting past in the interview? So if anybody's interviewing, we want to know, are you having trouble getting past the first round, that second round, or that final round? That second round question is a mix of both second and third round, as a heads up. Can you guys see the questions? Someone mentioned they can't see the questions.
Yeah. Looks like people can see them. All right, great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Looks like it's popping up. All right, guys, thank you. So it sounds like a lot of folks are having, a majority having trouble getting past that second or third round. So thank you for sharing. And I think this makes this section, especially around storytelling for interviews and this whole webinar, even more important, because at that second and third round is usually when you start to get to the hiring managers first. And so the hiring managers are really going to be those people that you want to convince around what kind of value in the story that you can craft around your experience, but you're also your own personal story. So thank you guys for sharing that information. So the final section we're going to talk about is interviews, and then I have a really cool guide that you can walk away from today with to help you in preparing for some of these interview questions. So the first thing I'm going to do is just share my screen again and talk about, 1 second. So we are back into the presentation, and So I'm going to go to the interviewing portion. So a lot of you guys have probably heard about these different interview frameworks to use, right? CAR, context, action, result, STAR, situation, task, action, result. There's another one, SOAR. And I highlighted this one actually because I really like SOAR, SOAR. And the reason for that is because of what you see highlighted, um, obstacles. And so in terms of obstacles, so SOAR is a really popular framework that a lot of tech companies expect candidates to adhere to, especially a company like Amazon. If anybody's ever interviewed there, if you're interested in interviewing there, they actually tell candidates that they use this framework, and it's a prerequisite that people come in with knowledge of that. They actually grade people based on, are they following this framework? And I highlighted obstacles because I really like how it reminds someone to include what challenge or obstacle they overcame. So if you think about back to what we talked about, a great Hollywood screenplay and what makes a great story, those two things are what challenge or obstacle did you have, and what was at stake if you didn't do that one thing or solve that one problem. And so they make it really easy with SOAR to include that when you talk about setting the context, what problem did you have, what was the action and the result. And so we have a couple examples. I'll interview Mario here in a mock type of format, just so you can get a sense of, you know, the most common question you might get in one way that you can tell a story around that is going to be quite frank, is someone will ask you, name a time when you overcame an obstacle or a challenge. And how you answer that is going to be typically in a story format is what they would expect. And so Mario, if I ask you that question, you know, how might you respond to something like that?
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. And I think when it comes to a question like this, just always try to think of a story and think about just like the three elements. Think about a problem that you're dealing with, think about the action that you took, and then after that, think about the result that came out of that. So I remember in my first role as a research assistant out of the Federal Reserve, I worked with a group of economists and we would generate reports based on these different surveys. And when it came to pulling out insights for the reports, we used a statistical package known as data. There was only one problem. I did not know how to use data, nor did I have a lot of time to learn how to use it. And I was responsible for pulling out some of these insights from these surveys. So I had this ownership to do that. So when it came to solving this problem, I did a couple of things. One, I read a lot of articles, watched a lot of YouTube videos on the best ways of using this data to learn more about it. I also kept like a journal, a log of all the different things that I worked on each day so that I could see whether I was progressing or not really well. And then the third thing was I reached out to my research assistant colleagues that had more experience working with data than I did. So the combination of those different things helped me to learn data better and then be able to pull out the insights I needed from those survey results. And then we're able to return the report in time.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And one of the things I'll also add, so that one's pretty, I think that you're expected to tell a story in that situation, but there's some other questions too that may not always look like a story is behind it, but you should try to answer as many interview questions as possible in a story format to really stand out. And one example of those kinds of questions that it's kind of unclear would be around what's your greatest strength or weakness? And so that one seems pretty simple, where you might want to just tell someone, oh, my greatest strength is, you know, I work too hard, or, you know, I'm a perfectionist to detail, and I'm trying to get better at that. You know, that's not a really robust answer that someone's going to remember or that's really going to impress the interviewer. Rather, try to frame it into a story of, for an example, the weakness question. How did you encounter this weakness, or how were you aware of this weakness, and what did you do to overcome that, or continually improve upon that weakness, is really what they're asking when they ask that question. And so again, Mario, you know, if someone was asking you that kind of question today, what might you say to people around what's your greatest weakness?
Yeah. So I would consider myself an introvert, and I tend to like working on my own and going deep down into projects on my own. So I remember in my first project, actually at Deloitte for a particular client, we had to create a data science training plan. And part of that included creating the curriculum for this training plan. So the idea was to have this plan that would help develop part of the workforce to have data science skills. And I did not have a learning and development background. But because I was on the team as a data science subject matter expert, I assumed that the ownership was on me, and I didn't mind that because I just wanted to work on that. So I was working on this on my own, working on the curriculum for this plan. And when it came to presenting it to internal leadership for review, they relayed to me that it is missing the core competence of a good training plan. And I remember my senior manager asking me how come I didn't reach out to any of my colleagues for help. And my response was that I just didn't want to burden them, and I just felt comfortable working on this on my own. Fortunately, we're able to rally, and I also did apologize to the team for my actions, but we're able to get together and we're able to relate to the client that we're going to deliver a better product down the line. So we pushed the deadline a little bit, and then eventually we're able to deliver a solid quality data science training plan.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Mario. So guys, I know we're up on time here. I'm going to share one more document with you before we wrap up. It's called the personal story document. For years, as a career strategist, one of the things that I always recommend to people is that you try to identify the most common interview questions or categories to expect, and then write out your answers beforehand so that you're always prepared with certain stories or answers to those particular questions. I did that for all my interviews, and I advise that to anybody, especially now in these video interviews. It's a lot easier to have those notes in front of you or on another screen or a computer. So here's a personal story doc. What we've done is we've created what are the most common interview categories that you can expect when you interview. So when you overcame a challenge, you can see here, displayed leadership, demonstrated teamwork and collaboration. And you can use this document just to write out stories. I always try to go for 2 to 3 stories for each category, because then you can use them in different questions, because a lot of interviewers like to ask similar questions that are in the same category. So we have these for you guys so you can start using that before your next interview. I even have an example I wrote out here so you can see for that problem solving question. It's an example of what was the problem, what was at stake if we didn't solve that problem, and then what were the results of fixing that problem. So you guys can use that as a framework if you want to create your own examples. So we'll leave this with you guys in an email. Like I said, we're going to send you all these resources we've showed you, examples of LinkedIn profiles, cover letter, resume, this personal story doc, and some other great stuff, including the recording from today. And as I mentioned before, if anybody's interested in one-on-one consulting or interview prep with any of our insiders, at nexplay.io, we have a lot of amazing coaches who work at companies like Amazon, Google, Mario at Deloitte, EY, Salesforce, Google, you name it. We have a lot of top companies with folks that are helping people get into some amazing jobs every day. So I know we're at time, but I'm actually going to stick around here for the next 10, 15 minutes. If anybody has any questions, we didn't get a chance to go through some of these questions. So Mario and I are going to stick around for the next 10 minutes or so just to knock out some of the questions. If you have to go, we completely understand. We're a little bit over. If you do go, we just want to say thank you so much for attending. And hopefully this reframes your thinking around how to tell stories, not just in the interview process, but in all these different parts of you, right? Your personal story, your LinkedIn online presence, cover letter and resume. And we hope to help with that either now or down the road as you interview. So thank you to those who are leaving. And we're just going to look through these questions here and try to get through them as much as we can.
Let's knock them out.
Question on how do you reach out to our team for coaching? So I'm going to include links in a recap email. So anybody who was here today, You can check us out at nexplay.io. It's nexplay.io. If you want to wait for us to send out that email, we'll have all the information in there. So you can sign up and discuss with our team about meeting with potential insiders at other companies. So in cruising through the questions, one was for you, Mario, from Travis.
Yeah.
Do you have a good example of a breakthrough career move, transition or pivot you could tell us about?
Yes. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to open the... I think I did see that earlier. Yeah, so a lot of these type of examples I've seen tend to be, it seems like within coding, like I know colleagues that majored in anthropology and they got into web development, or majored in biology and then got into data science and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of that type of transition within coding, but it seems like, but I don't want to assume that you're thinking about just coding, maybe just think about generally. I think the main thing when it comes to, I think it's possible for anyone to make that transition into a career, depending on the career, but I think for most careers, I think what matters is just reaching out to people within that space to get better ideas of how they got into that career, and to get more information of the type of obstacles that they face, and just showing, and then also just building on your skills. I think we are currently within a space that we all just want to profess what we think we can do, but we're not really putting in the time to show like what we could possibly do. So take courses, do workshops, write, reach out to others, network, share your information, give presentations just like this. You could do it on your own, doing that type of stuff to emphasizing that you have that ability to work within that particular space. Hopefully that answered your question.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. We have another questions here. Sometimes I feel like people want to express themselves better, but they're limited by the restraints of what you can put on an application, and how you've heard the stat around hiring managers only view a resume for several seconds before they go on to the next one.
Yeah.
How can you stand out given that restraint? And that's understandable. That happens today even more so than ever. Part of what I would say to that is the resume and the application are just one element of your story. And it's true that in every situation, you're not going to have someone who sits there for 5 minutes and says, let me take a look at this resume. It's not going to happen every time, which is why it's extremely important when you talk about a story with your digital brand. That's a great way to stand out. And I've seen so many people who have worked on their LinkedIn profiles, have created that kind of story to where now employers are reaching out to them. Believe it or not, even now, we've helped several of our own members get jobs just from people reaching out on LinkedIn saying, wow, I was really compelled by your story, and you look like you have a great skill set. So that's one of the areas I look at is LinkedIn. And if you've seen some of my content on LinkedIn, I preach this all the time, is I don't ever let an applicant tracking system or a company online application system dictate whether or not I get a job at that company. A majority of applications will never see a recruiter. And so because of that, what I advocate for is reaching out to hiring managers and hiring managers and employees who might be potential peers or teammates of yours, so that you can start to build relationships and they get to hear your story. It's a lot easier to get 30 minutes of time for a coffee chat to an employee on a potential team you might want to work on than it is trying to get the attention of a recruiter. So that's why I always advocate for that. We've seen a lot of success with people who are reaching out, having those coffee chats. It's a good way to break in and get that one-on-one time with somebody at a company that you want to work at, who then starts to understand your story. And then they tell that story to hiring managers or other people on their team. And then if there's an open role, you're top of mind for them to consider you for that role. So the whole point I'm trying to make is don't limit your story to just that application. It should be on all these different aspects of your job search. and try to reach out to people and have coffee chats if you're able to.
It seems as if we got questions both in the Q&A and chat.
Yeah, if you
So
see any in the chat here,
yeah, I definitely don't want to leave questions unanswered. I'm trying to think where to start. Let's see. What's the first one? Okay. Here's one. As a coach, do you see the market picking up, or is the overall space continuing to slow down? Again, it's different from everyone's perspective, but trying to get a real sense check. A real time sense check. What do you suggest in the meantime if the market still hasn't picked up?
Gotcha. Yeah, from my perspective, so we place people in a lot. We work with people breaking into a lot of different companies. Because of that, I have a unique lens into the industry and what's going on. Unfortunately, it's still pretty volatile. I think we saw over the last month, people were starting to get a little bit more confident. We're seeing some companies starting to dial back now a little bit with some uncertainty around things like the unemployment insurance and how that's going to impact the market in the third quarter. The good thing is, I'll say, is that there are pockets of companies that are still doing really well in the pandemic, that are made for this kind of work from home, remote work environment. So I think it depends what market and what companies, but where you see some companies laying off people, you see other companies like a Robinhood or a Zoom or a Slack in the tech world that their products are specifically made to help scale and support a remote workforce and are doing really well and hiring tons of people. You have big tech, even though they've dialed back hiring a little bit, that they continue to hire people. Even though we're in this lockdown quarantine mode, a lot of these companies are still looking to the future and wanting to build. And if you're in a technology role, or you have a technology background, even though it is tougher, I'm still very hopeful because there are pretty good pockets, maybe a little bit harder to find them, but there are some great companies and industries that are doing well right now. So it's kind of up in the air right now, but I think you need to just look in the right places. And, if you have questions around that, me or any of our insiders at nexplay can help direct you into what are some of those good companies.
Awesome. Thank you, Reno. So request for everyone. I know we got questions in both chat and the Q&A. If you wrote a question within the chat section, if you could please transfer it into the Q&A, that will help us to answer the question so that we can mark it off as answered so that we can keep track of it. Thank you. Yep. So I see this data science question, so I'll just answer this quickly from Michael. All right, so the question is, this is more targeted towards data science. If applying for a data science / AI role for the first time, is GitHub required for the role, or is the ability to tell a story more compelling? Really good question. So I'll be honest with you. At first, I assumed that you needed GitHub to show, just like to track your progress and how often you are uploading projects and things that you've worked on. But I just saw this article that a colleague shared where it seems as if a good number of hiring managers might not be actually checking GitHub. And even for myself, when I think about the data science work that I've done, a lot of it is with federal clients. So I can't put that into my personal GitHub. So I think, but at the same time, working on your own side projects and uploading into GitHub to share that code with other people, I think is very beneficial. So definitely do that just for your sake, but I don't think you need to do that to get hired by a hiring manager within the data science space. I think it's the ability to tell stories. So think about different business problems that clients are facing and how you use like machine learning or infographics to solve that problem will be helpful. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Mario, there's another one around breaking into data science.
Yes.
Trying to learn more about data science and actively seeking data roles that allow them to build DS experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think I'm going to assuming that you're in the introductory space and even me, I consider myself in the introductory space because it's still a lot for me to learn. I think it's just good to see what other people are doing. So going to Kaggle and seeing different types of competitions and seeing the code that people have submitted. Also entering your own submissions, your own competitions, because in that case, you're actually put into the fire and you're actually working on real life projects similar to the type of companies that you want to work for. So that's good. That's good experience that you're gaining, and also good stories that you can tell when it comes to your interview and your resume. And just consistently practice. One mistake I made when I finished my coding program is that when I was in my coding program, I was obviously coding every day. But the problem was that when I finished the program, I thought I had this knowledge. And because I wasn't coding every day and I was on a project where it didn't involve code, I lose some of those skills. So just consistently practice, consistently read stuff, consistently watch YouTube videos, use Udemy, use all these different platforms. Your biggest asset is yourself. So build on your asset, build on yourself. And I think that's a great way to get into the data science space.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I have to jump here, so if you have time for one more, Mario, if you want to pick one out, and
Yeah.
We'll try to get to this one here before we close up shop.
Okay. I see this one here. Mario and Reno, how does one tell a compelling story on the resume and cover letter that will make sense and still be accepted by ATS? Personally, I've been reaching out to people at companies of interest and have those informational interviews and coffee chats. And they almost always say to share my resume as well as apply on the online system because all applications have to go through the online platform. Then dead silence. Where's the Discord?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good question. So my first question to anybody who's reaching out for coffee chats or informational chats, how many messages are you sending? How many emails and in-mails? I always recommend people should try to strive for a pretty high volume of messages. So if you did 25 messages and didn't work out, a lot of successful folks who are landing coffee chats that turn into offers are reaching out to 100, 125, 150 people, knowing that only a few are going to, or a certain percentage are going to get back to them, maybe 10, 20%. Of those percentage, a lot of those people are going to say, you know what, submit your application to the ATS. It has to go there. And then there's going to be a core few of people that you have pretty strong alignment with that you can continue the relationship with. And so that's what I would say is you never want the result of the end of a coffee chat or informational interview to just end in, let me, just submit your application to the ATS and we'll see what happens. There should be some way or some connection that you're trying to make with that person after that first meeting, whether that's asking if they're willing to connect again so you can learn more about their job and how they did things, or maybe it's sending them some things that they might find helpful just to stay top of mind. It could be an event or an article that's interesting related to their team or their job. That could be asking for introductions to other people internally at that company that you can talk to. So you should constantly be following up to keep going in different directions with that coffee chat. So that would be my advice, is that you're certainly going to have situations that don't end up in interview and offer, which is why you have to aim for that high volume and then continue to, with certain people, keep the relationship going, keep lines of communication. It's not going to happen right away, but let's say it's 1 month or 2 months down the road. If they know you as someone that's been in their orbit for the last couple months, who's reaching out, adding value, those are the kinds of folks who are the first in line to be considered for opportunities or get introduced to people who have the right opportunities. So that would be my 2 cents there on, if that strategy isn't working for you, higher volume and then keeping lines of communication, adding value to some of those folks. But anyways, we do have to jump, guys. Thank you so much for staying a little over 15, 20 minutes over with us. Hopefully you learned some good stuff here today. Like I said, we hope this isn't the end of us helping you through your job search, through your interviews, and anything related to your career. We will be sending an email with a recording and all these great resources and documents, cover letters, including my own, that you guys can take a look at. And if we can help you guys and you have an interest in getting into some of these top companies, we have plenty of insiders at great companies that can work with you one-on-one to help with resume, LinkedIn, interview prep, and all that kind of stuff. So feel free to reach out to us through there. Again, thank you guys all. Thanks to Juana and 1871 for making this possible. And thank you, Mario, for all your insights and being with me here today.
It's great.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great rest of the weekend.